All right. Forget what you think you know. More money doesn't always mean more problems, and it can buy you happiness. A new study reveals that rich people are happier. Shocker. That and some of the other results of the report caused quite a stir when we read it. So, of course, we had to make it our money talker of the day. Here in our own unscientific study of whether or not money really does buy you happiness, investment advisor Scott Martin, the Wall Street Journal's Veronica Dagher, and our very own Charles Payne. Great to have you all on the show. So we'll start with the easy one. I guess it shouldn't be a total shocker that they found that in households making $75,000 a year or more, 66% gave their lives an 8 or better, but only 36% of those in households making less than $30,000 were happy. Charles, what do you think? Were you shocked by that?
No, I wasn't shocked. I think of all the numbers, all the different variables in this report, the one that I guess was most disheartening is the group 50 to 64.
Yes, I know. You jumped right to that. Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay, because you're right. You should go with that. That was kind of the most interesting part. Those were the people that were most miserable. 50 to 64. If you're watching out there and you're 50 to 64, apparently you're suicidal, according to this study. I mean, Veronica, what do you make of that?
You know what? I think that time period is full of angst for people. I think they're really nervous, wondering, am I going to retire? Am I about to get laid off from my job because I'm a high earner? If I am going to retire, what's next for me? What's happening with my kids? I'm maybe having to fund their college for a few more years, but I have to hang on to this job. So I think that time is full of worry for people.
Yeah. Scott, were you surprised about that? I mean, from the people from 50 to 64 are the most miserable. But at the same time, those over 65, they were the happiest. So, boom,
bingo.
Right on that birthday, you just explode into happiness.
Finish line.
Hey, everybody should be turning 65 and we'll make it. I think it's interesting, though, because to Veronica's point, Melissa, it's probably all the things she mentioned, and everybody from 50 to 64 putting so much pressure on themselves. I mean, isn't that really what we're talking about here? I think, money may not buy you total happiness, but it certainly buys you comfort. But the pressure we put on ourselves certainly weighs us down, too. And I think that's what you're seeing and what Charles pointed out, because that demographic eventually flips into one of the happiest ones at 65.
Yeah, Charles, what do you think about that? I mean, totally miserable, 50 to 64, 65, boom. Suddenly they're the happiest group out there.
It kind of feels like you crossed the finish line.
I guess.
Like, oh, boy, I made it. It's like the day after right after the dentist appointment.
Right.
Leading up to it, you're full of angst, and as soon as it's over, it's like, oh, man, I made it. But
I made it. I lived.
You know what? But by the way, this time it is especially true because this is the group that's got so much pressure on them, to Veronica's point. And they, we just went through the financial meltdown. So they've got even more anxiety, and they took a big step backwards. And do they have the window of opportunity to make it up? They should be anxious about that.
Yeah, I mean, this assumes a lot of things. To me, it meant everybody's really retiring at 65, and I thought that was one of those things that we gave up on, that no one had enough money any longer. And it kind of assumes, that you don't want to work after 65. There's a lot of people that want to stay in the game. I know, Scott, what do you think? I mean, are you racing to that 65, and then you're going to shut it all down and get on a boat and head to the Bahamas?
Yeah. He's already done that. What are you talking about?
I'm saying, what are you talking about? I'm doing that tomorrow, Melissa. No, I'm dying to get to 65. You know what the other thing is, too, though, guys, is think about the social safety nets that kick in around those years, too. I think Veronica was kind of getting at something where I think people maybe closer to the 50-year-old range are worried about Social Security. I mean, I know I have clients that are constantly worried about Medicare providers. So, you have to think, too, there's a social safety net aspect that kicks in around those years, too, that might make people feel a little better.
Veronica, I was surprised that the poll found little difference between men and women in every age group and every financial category, that there was no difference. And it didn't even differentiate, if you were the one working or if it was your spouse that was working. It was just it was the same for men and women at every age, pretty much. Was that surprising to you?
I was surprised, too, because I think from what I've heard from a lot of financial advisors, women tend to worry a lot more than men. And they also have a much longer time frame to plan for. A lot of them become widows or get divorced, and so they have to have a lot more money, and chances are they've been in the workforce a lot less time than the men. So I would think they would have more things to worry about, so that is really interesting.
Another thing that I thought was pretty shocking, and Charles, you can speak to this one, is what a difference education made. That 2/3 of those with advanced degrees, regardless of income, gave their lives an 8 or greater. I mean, we're so down on the college debt problem. Apparently, if you go to graduate school, you're happy no matter what. How is that possible?
You know what? I got to tell you, I'm glad you brought it up because there's so many people out there, and this is all both sides of the aisle, who are saying, well, college isn't worth it anymore.
Yeah.
And every time we get the data, it's just not economically. I think being a person who loves knowledge, who loves to learn, it adds something to your life it's an intangible, but it's a great intangible.
Veronica, were you surprised by that one?
You know what, I wasn't so much, just because I think education can open up opportunities for you.
Yeah.
And so maybe the more educated you are, there's other diversions you pursue, such as reading. You broaden your horizons.
Yeah.
And I think that can help your perspective as well.
So, Scott, what is your bottom line on all this? I mean, did you walk away from it? Because we labeled it as, does money buy you happiness? And there's a lot of conflicting things in here. What's your final takeaway? Does money buy you happiness?
I think it buys you comfort. I think it buys you things to fall back on. But
I like
my boy Biggie Smalls, Melissa. Biggie Smalls had it right. More money, more problems. The more money you have, the more you can lose. There's a lot of risk.
Yeah, I don't know. Charles, what do you think?
I say it buys you happiness. It doesn't dismiss sadness, but it could buy a whole, I think Pearl Bailey, I'll go back a little further than Scott. Pearl Bailey says she's been rich and she's been poor, and rich is a whole lot better.
Yeah, Veronica, I mean, they say it doesn't buy you good health and it doesn't buy you, a good relationship, but no, maybe it does, because you can afford better doctors and you're not fighting with your husband all the time about money. I think maybe money does buy you happiness. I know it's going to be unpopular. Forgive me. Veronica, bail me out on this one. You agree or throw me to the wolves?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I think it can help your relationships, but for the long term, I think there's got to be something a little bit more there.
So it doesn't buy you happiness, but it sure helps. That
Sure
was our
helps.
takeaway. All right, guys, thank you so much. Great job. Next.